Introducing today's featured speaker, Steve Silberman. Steve was named the Statesman Journal's new president and publisher on July 10th, 2008. Steve comes to the Statesman after serving as the executive director of the Palm Springs Desert Sun for 6 years. During his tenure in Palm Springs, he oversaw the creation of MyDesert.com, which was a beta site for Gannett. MyDesert.com became the basis for changes to websites for all of Gannett's newspaper and television stations being rolled out in 2008. Steve also spearheaded the Desert Sun's work on innovation as one of 6 demonstration sites for API's Newspaper Next project. His work on innovation has been mentioned in Forbes, American Journalism Review, and Press Time. Before joining the Desert Sun, he was managing editor of the Idaho Statesman in Boise. Steve has also been a reporter and editor at the Orange County Register, the Record in Hackensack, New Jersey, and the Commercial Appeal in Memphis, Tennessee. Originally from New York, he has a master's degree in journalism from the Columbia University Graduate School of Journalism. Steve and his wife Brenda have 2 children, Daniel, 14, who I learned just started high school here, and Anna, age 11. Please join me in welcoming Steve Silberman.
Thank you. Dreams do come true. I've dreamed about coming to the Statesman Journal and calling Salem my home for many years now. I asked to come here, in fact, and not just once. I had the chance to come to Salem about 10 years ago, and I came here several times, and my visits left quite an impression. I wanted to be in a community that felt like a community, where neighbors care about each other, where you can bump into people you know in the supermarket, where people take pride in the community and are civic-minded, where there are good schools, where you can raise a family. I wanted to be in the state capital because I love politics. I wanted to be in the Northwest because it's so beautiful. And I wanted to be at a newspaper that was ambitious enough to do good work and yet small enough where you could connect to the community. It all added up to Salem. And while moving is never easy, I still feel months later like I am living the dream. I mention all this because I know, and you know, the recent history of the Statesman Journal. I've been following this paper for about 10 years. And I know that in that time I am the 4th publisher, and Bill Church is our 5th editor. That kind of revolving door is not good for the newspaper, and it's not good for the community. I truly believe that is a thing of the past, and I hope in time you will realize that as well. I'm grateful that the Chamber has given me an opportunity today to speak with you, and that so many of you are interested in hearing more about the Statesman Journal. I've received such a warm welcome from so many people in the community, but no one has done as much as Mike McLaren and his team at the Chamber to welcome me with open arms on so many different occasions. They have gone out of their way. I will share my vision of the newspaper and its place in the community. I will talk to you a little bit about how the way in which we report the news and cover this community is changing. And I will tell you a little bit about how I see our future. Let me start out by telling you what a publisher does. I've had a number of people ask me this, and I suspect many more were curious but too shy or too polite to ask. I'm in essence the CEO of the Statesman Journal. The buck stops with me, and I'm ultimately responsible for all that we do, our advertising, our distribution, our coverage, and the like. Luckily, I have a strong team working with me. Newspapers are all about, or should be about, community. It's hard to imagine a great community without a great newspaper, and I'm equally hard-pressed to imagine a great newspaper without a great community. They really go hand in hand. What I love most about what I do is that newspapers foster community. They bring people together and give us a common identity. We need to be a part of the community as well as to cover it. Certainly covering the community requires us from time to time to step back, to keep our distance, but we cannot allow that to keep us from ever being part of the community. We live and work here too. People should see themselves and their world reflected in the Statesman Journal. We need to make sure that the Statesman Journal fits Salem, that we understand what's important to this community, what might make a good newspaper in Palm Springs, where I last work, or in Boise, or in Memphis, or in New Jersey, the various places I've been, does not mean it would work well in Salem. I know firsthand what it's like when a newspaper is out of touch with its community, and it is not pretty. When I first arrived in Boise 10 years ago, I quickly discovered that people hated the newspaper. And I don't use those words lightly. It did not reflect what was important to Idahoans. It ignored the outdoors. It paid little attention to state government and had scant coverage of the big events in town. Luckily, we dug ourselves out of that hole. In all honesty, in starting here, my biggest concern is making sure that I understand the heart and soul of this community. I've been spending a lot of time meeting with people and, more importantly, listening to people about what matters most to them. We need to capture and spark conversation in the community. We need to be so connected to the community that we are writing and reporting on the things that people are actually talking about, which can range from the presidential election to the Beavers beating USC and everything in between. We try to capture the things that people are talking about in a variety of ways. In the columns that Cappy Lynn and Carol Curry and Ron Cowan and Bill Church and others write. In the editorials that Dick Hughes and Barbara Curtin write. In the local news we report, and the stories that we tell, and the projects that we do. We also need to engage people, to give them things to talk about. I love newspapers most when I read something and want to share it with somebody. And that comes from discovering something new, something interesting that I didn't know and I think somebody else would enjoy. We need to celebrate the community. Our coverage needs to be balanced. I don't like people who are always negative or always complaining or who seem to have little joy in their lives. And I don't expect people to spend time with the Statesman Journal if we are always negative. We have, and I pledge to you that we will continue to have, our fair share of good news. We have more good news than people often realize because human nature is such that we tend to remember bad news more than good news. One good example of how we celebrate the wonderful things about Salem was our coverage of South Salem School band trip to the Olympics this summer. We had an extensive coverage, and we produced not one, but two special sections about their trip. We need to be a watchdog for the community to make sure our tax dollars are being spent wisely. At times we need to challenge the community, just as good friends challenge each other. We need to shed light on the important issues affecting our lives, and that's precisely what we have done with our Raising a Community project that has been examining the well-being of children in this community. We need to support the community. We do that in a variety of ways. Our Raising a Community series is a way of supporting the community. We also support the community by sponsoring events. We sponsor about 60 events or organizations in the community a year. That's more than one a week. We support the community with our philanthropic donations, with our participation in the United Way, with our participation on various organizations. We put a lot of time and energy into two big annual events, the Academic All-Stars, which recognizes our top students, and the Athena Awards, which honors an individual each year who assists women in reaching their full leadership potential.